My name is Mishka Edwards. I'm a lecturer at the St. Vincent and Grenadines Community College, Division of Technical and Vocational Education. I grew up in farming. I've been involved in farming for, well, my whole life. I've been delivering agriculture at the cottage for the past 16 years. I'm originally from Cane Hall, born and raised right here. I'm a part-time farmer, specifically focused on pineapple production. I'm involved with youth groups and women's group as it relates to sustainable agriculture. So tonight I will be your presenter on sustainable agriculture. Just give me a moment to get my presentation started. Right. And I do believe agriculture is life. And when it comes to food security is basically everybody's business. So it's a pleasure to have so many people enrolled in this program tonight and interested in sustainable agriculture, which is very important because with the effects of climate change, and as we know, climate change occur, it's basically man-made, as I would say, because of the rising population, we had to get involved in growing more food, and we ended up in the green revolution, where we talk about increasing amount of chemical, pesticides, genetic engineering, and so on. And now we have the effect of all that occurring, right? With the excessive amount of greenhouse gases. Not only did climate change was caused by the release of CFC into the ozone layer, but also from agriculture is one of the main product of these greenhouse gas emission, especially animal production, where those individuals who love beef, no offense, who love beef, but methane is one of the gas that comes from livestock production, and that is one of the greatest emission that cause climate change. So what we're going to try to do now is focus on sustainable agriculture as a way to mitigate the effect of climate change, because at this stage, we have to try our best to see what we can do, right? So, your learning outcomes. Upon the completion of this lesson tonight, well, before I get into this, let me explain. Sustainable agriculture has 4 components. So tonight, we'll be focusing on the introduction and some aspects of sustainable agriculture in terms of the benefits, how to select healthy seedlings, strategies for sustainable agriculture. There's another component that talk about soil health, then pre and post harvest factors, and the last unit is on agro-processing. All right, so learning outcomes. Upon completion of this lesson, the learner should be able to explain the meaning of sustainable agriculture, discuss the features and benefits of sustainable agriculture, explain the different sustainable agriculture production techniques, know components of agriculture, different practices, be able to select a healthy seedlings, be able to discuss the different strategies such as crop scheduling, intercropping, crop rotation, IPM, IDM, and so on. And at the end of the session, I normally choose 2 individuals, but the participant is so large, so that I would leave it for 2 individuals to volunteer themselves to do the millie, right? The millie is basically the most important lesson learned yesterday or the most important lesson learned last class. So basically, what stands out to you? So next session, you will have 5 minutes to basically give a synopsis of what stood out to you in this, the last session that you would have. Let me just minimize the side here. So what is sustainable agriculture? You've been hearing about it. You've been hearing about climate smart agriculture. You've been hearing about water saving techniques, water harvesting, all these sort of things because of the effect of climate change. As you can see right now, we are going through a period of high temperatures and a longer period of dryness or drought, because we're supposed to be in the rainy season, but because of the effect of climate change, it has caused change in the weather pattern. So you're going to have an extended period of dry season rather than being able to enter the period of the rainy season, right? Because in St. Vincent, we have dry, rainy season, right? So what is sustainable agriculture? Sustainable agriculture is the efficient production of safe, high quality agriculture products in a way that protects and improves the natural environment. So when we talk about protect and improve the natural environment, gone are the days when most people know about conventional agriculture, especially when we had banana production, it was just conventional agriculture. No one did a soil test to know how many nutrients, what type of nutrients was needed in the soil, what was it deficient in. We only got the fertilizer and we broadcast it into the field, not thinking about the long-term effect that it would cause on the environment. I mean, today you can drive about St. Vincent and see the changes in that effect on the environment. We used to have rivers, now we have streams, and that is because of eutrophication. All the excessive amount of fertilizer and chemical that was added to the soil basically was washed into the river, and there's a buildup of algae, and obviously with a buildup of algae, it's going to reduce the oxygen level in the river, causing it to become a stream, right? So now we are trying to go back to what we would say the olden days, farming without the excessive use of chemical. And that is what I normally do. Even in my pineapple productions here, I have never used fertilizer. So I would use things like animal manure, which is a coal manure in terms of things like sheep and goat dung, rabbit dung. If I have access to bat, I will actually use that as well. Cow manure is also a coal manure, but I tend not to use that because that comes with the effect of weeding. It has a lot of weed seed, so you end up having a lot of weeding to do. So I just stick to things like rabbit, sheep, and goat, and if I have access to bats, right? So as we said before, sustainable agriculture is basically farming in a way to protect and improve the natural environment, not cause additional harm, because we have to think about individuals who's going to come after us. And because there's also a rising population, there's a need to produce more food, but we have to think about producing food in a safe way that it would not consistently or continually cause harm to the environment. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about next session is things like soil health, how you can identify if your soil is healthy, different soil tests that you can do from home, such as pH, such as nutrient. Even when you go purchase a piece of land, just by looking at the soil color, you can determine whether that soil is high in organic matter or if it's not high in organic matter and those sort of things. Because if a soil is healthy, it's going to give you a healthy yield. But if the soil is unhealthy, you're not going to have a healthy yield. And adding fertilizer and chemical to the soil does not make your soil healthy, right? Because you have to think of what effect it's going to cause on the environment, right? So there's also social effect, economic conditions that occur, because when we lose the water supply in terms of excessive amount of water running, excessive amount of chemicals running off into the waterway, right? So that you're not only causing water pollution. So when there's algae bloom and it's actually caused the river to become smaller into a stream, then the water supplies there reduce. And as you know, this year for World Food Day, the theme is water is food, water is life. So we do need water. You understand? So we have to think about the effect of the way that we continuously farm. We have to change it and start farming in a sustainable manner, right? It also will help you to reduce the cost of production in terms of buying all these fertilizers and chemicals and what's not. Yes, at the beginning, it will seem a little bit tedious in terms of when you have to do IPM and you have to do monitoring and you have to move things like manure to put into your field, because, you know, moving fertilizer is a bit more easier than moving things like manure and those sort of things, and the smell, and I'm going to tell you to create a compost heap, those sort of things. So sustainable agriculture might be tedious in the beginning, but you have to think about the environment and your future generations to come, right? You don't want to be in your 80s and we are basically involved or having food insecurity, right? You have to think about food security. And if we keep harming the soil, harming the environment, eventually when you get in the older age and you cannot farm for yourself, you might run into the situation of food insecurity. Because as you know, when we talk about food security, you have to think about access, stability, utilization, all these things, right? In order for food to be food secure. right? So a simple definition for sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture is a practice of growing crops using the principles of ecology to ensure economic viability and social equity, right? Ecology is basically the study of relationship between organism and the environment, right? In sustainable agriculture, what you try to do is to create a farming ecosystem. I mean, I can talk about my time growing up in farming, right? And looking at that and looking at what people is doing now, sometimes have me really puzzled as to why we have moved away from what we used to do. So when you're talking about an ecosystem, right? You in an ecosystem, you would have different biodiversities because you will create an environment to encourage the growth of different biodiversity. So now you would see someone purchase a piece of land or get a piece of land and they say that they're going to do farming. The first thing they're doing is remove all the trees. Error, right? Because trees create a microclimate. Some of these trees are host for birds and other biodiversity. Then they have flowers, so they will attract things like butterfly, hummingbirds, and so on. So when you remove that, you're not only reducing the biodiversity, you're also causing a buildup of heat in that area because trees create a microclimate. So you have to think about that. You have to think about things like agroforestry, because me growing up with my grandparents in farming, you would have the trees above. So you have mango, you would have mahogany and other trees above. And under, they would be farming things like sweet potato, peanut, dasheen, and so on. So these trees created a microclimate. I mean, they may not have known or understand the science behind it. But now, as we become more knowledgeable, it seems that we are removing the things that we actually need. And now, 10, 20 years later, we're trying to reinvent the wheel where we're talking about reforestation, sustainable agriculture, climate smart agriculture. And climate smart agriculture is not anything new. It's just that we have moved and focused for the past 20 years, and conventional agriculture now realize that the damage that we have caused to the environment. So we move back, start thinking about sustainable agriculture, right? But this is just a picture that is just showing the trees, things like intercropping with different trees, that the benefit that it would have, because we are talking about ecosystem. So when you're talking about intercropping, you can intercrop with things like plants that would add nitrogen to the soil, because in primary school we talk about the nitrogen fixing bacteria, but for whatever reason, when we grow up, we tend to forget about that, right? So planting things like corn with pigeon peas, corn with peanuts, corn with things like beans, and so on, you will be adding nitrogen to the soil. And some of these plants are heavy feeders that needs a lot of nutrients, right? And when we talk about agroforestry, well, we're not only talking about trees, but in agroforestry, there's trees, there's shrubs, there's the ground crops, and there's animals around. And these animals around tend to add back nutrients to the soil because there's a drop-ins and so on, and it's going to add back nutrients in the soil. And this is termed as integrated farming. And later on down, we'll get a bit more into it. But I just needed to show this picture just to show simple ways of crop rotation, intercropping, and so on. But as I said, further down, we'll get into it. So sustainable agriculture, right? What does sustainable agriculture focus on? Simple things like conservation of water, and how we go about conserving water. Simple things like mulching, the type of irrigation system that we use. Let me just see if I can move. Feedback. Right, so we talk about conserving water, and when we conserve water, we can do simple things like mulching. We can do the type of drip irrigation system that we choose. We can do hydroponics, aeroponics, all these sort of things when we're talking about conservation of water. We're supposed to, well, you have to reduce the amount of chemical use, reduce your fertilizer uses, right? Promote biodiversity, not only in crop, but among livestock, and also prevent soil erosion. So when you hear sustainable agriculture, these are some aspects that you're supposed to focus on. In the first picture, this is just an example of an A-frame hydroponic system. And in the second picture, it's also a hydroponic system, but it's a flatbed hydroponic system. Right. So sustainable agriculture integrate three main goals. And these three main goals, as we talked about before, so environmental health. So the first one is environmental health, economic profitability, and social and economic equity, right? So these are the three main goals that that sustainable agriculture is focused around. As we go further down, each of them is going to be broken down so you could understand what we mean. But environmental health is very important, right? And when we talk about environmental health, we're talking about preventing certain disease. Because even though I may tell you to do water harvesting, if you don't do water harvesting properly, you can actually create a hazard to yourself in terms of you have the bin, the water open, so you have droppings from pigeons and whatever other animals flying around. Then you're going to add that straight to your lettuce, right? And if you add that straight to your lettuce, and you know, lettuce is something that you do not wash when you do not cook, sorry, you do not provide heat, right? So you just wash and consume. So then you can be consuming things like E. coli and those sort of things. So even when you're involved in sustainable agriculture, you have to think about environmental health. And in thinking about environmental health, you are reducing the amount of pesticides you use, the amount of chemicals you use, the amount of fertilizers you use, because these excess, when they wash into the water, they actually cause water pollution and, I said, eutrophication. Also, with environmental health, for the past 20 or so years, everybody been talking and doing slash and burn, but is that ideal? When you start burning any sort of not only garbage, but anything you burn, you're adding POPs into the environment. And when we're talking about POPs, we're talking about persistent organic pollutants. And when these things add into the environment, they not only cause respiratory problems, but they can end up in the waterways, into fish, and then back into our bodies, right? And that is a breach of environmental health. So we have to be careful about the things that we do. So instead of burning rubbish and burning garbage, we try to compost what can be composed and recycle what can be recycled. Find uses for your plastic in terms of creating them, turning them into maybe pots and so on that you can reuse, right? When you talk about economic profitability, you're talking about in terms of what you put into your farm in terms of your cost of production and all these sort of things. You must be conscious of that, because sometimes when you're involved in conventional farming, you get so involved in buying hybrid seeds, which cannot replant after. You're no longer focused on heirloom seeds because you're buying these hybrid seeds that may be heat tolerant, they may be resistance against certain pest and disease and those sort of things. But at the same time, those same seeds can cause a genetic erosion, and I will get into that a little bit later, right? You have to think about social and economic equity. So some objectives of sustainable agriculture, sustainable crop production. One, you must be able to satisfy human needs for food, fiber, and other products, right? To make the most efficient use of non-renewable resources on farm resources and to integrate where appropriate. You also must be focused on to sustain the economic viability of the farm operation and to enhance the quality of life, not only for the farmers, but on the society of whole. And when we talk about quality of life, not only for the farmers, but for the society of whole, sometimes when these farmers are always exposed to certain pesticide and insecticide, it can actually cause a bit of health problems. I've known of a friend who died, I realized this year he passed 10 years, who were always using a lot of chemicals, and he died from skin cancer. You understand? So you have to be careful of some of these pesticides that you use. Why is sustainable agriculture or sustainable crop production needed? Conventional crop production is unsustainable, right? It leads to soil degradation because of the excessive amount of chemicals that are used in the soil. Sometimes when you decide to till in that area, it is so fine, it's like dust-like, and that's because the soil microorganism in that soil has basically been depleted because of the amount of pesticides that has been added to that soil, right? How do you recover from something like soil degradation? Now, what I normally tell individuals, if you want to know if a soil is healthy, dig 1 feet deep, 12 inches deep. And if you find at least 5 earthworms, you know you have a healthy soil, right? At least 5, right? When it's dropped below 5, you have problems, right? So you have to look for at least 5 earthworms and you have a healthy soil. If you dig and you don't have that, you're going to have to start adding organic matters. And when we're talking organic matters, it can be compost, it can be sheep and goat dung, it can be cattle dung. If you're thinking about using things like chicken manure, I only use chicken manure in one way. I compost it, right? So when I'm building a compost heap, I will add the chicken manure on different layers. So you know, when you're doing compost, you have to add your carbon and your greens, so brown and your greens. So I will do brown, green. You know, you wet each layer and then I will do a layer of the chicken manure, right? So I only use that if it's composted, right? So back to why we need sustainable crop production. There's an overuse of water and disruption in the hydraulic system. You know, at certain time of the year here, you have to ration water where they turn off in the evening and turn back on at 5 a.m. in the morning because of there will be a low supply. But if you're involved in things like installing things like drip irrigation system and you have timers and those sort of things, you could be able to reduce the amount of water that you use. And I always encourage individuals to get to do drip irrigation over sprinkler irrigation, because if you do sprinkler irrigation, many things could occur. Sometimes it doesn't reach the crop. Secondly, excessive amount is going on the leaf and you're talking about fungus and so on, especially if there's a high humidity, then you know you would have problems and loss of water. So if you do drip irrigation, it goes right to the root, so you're talking about conserving water right there, right? With conventional crop production, there's environmental pollution, and we talk about that. There is loss in biological and genetic biodiversification, right? There's heavy dependence on external output. And when we talk about heavy dependence on external output, normally you're so involved in buying seeds that are hybrid because you want seeds that are salt tolerant, drought resistant, all these genetically modified seeds, right? Or genetically engineered seeds, that not realizing these seeds cannot plant back. You will always have to go back to get that seed from the supplier to plant. So you're going to be heavily dependent on external output rather than what our parents do when we were younger in terms of save seeds, right? If you focus on heirloom varieties, you would be able to save seeds. So you would be able to harvest, store, dry them, and then you can utilize them back. But if we're going to be focused on genetic engineering seeds, then we will always have to be dependent on Caribbean chemicals and other places who sell these seeds, right? Loss of local control over agriculture production. And I don't know how much people have realized in the last 10 years, we have basically lost field corn. Everybody is so focused on sweet corn that earlier when we started planting sweet corn here, it used to be basically very small and not a high production, but we were so focused that we keep trying to get varieties that would be ideal to grow in the tropics. And we did, because we have summer gene, we have bright gene, and trust me, they do well. But we didn't take into consideration genetic erosion, right? Where these things like corn, they cross-pollinate, and because they cross-pollinate, they can lead to genetic erosion. When last have we seen a field of field corn? We mostly see fields of sweet corn, and trust me, I can't say we didn't get it right. We get it right because when you look at these fields of sweet corn, they're big, they're lovely, they're looking good. But when last have we seen field corn? Let's say we're talking about we don't get access to seeds from abroad. We end up in a situation where access to outside, getting supplies from outside cut off. We're gonna be in problems because we are so dependent on getting these seeds from abroad, because these seeds are not true to type and we cannot plant them and get back the same start of yield and those sort of things. So we are heavy dependent on external inputs. When are we going to get back to saving seeds in terms of get back to heirloom varieties where you can save the seeds and plant back? There's only few crops that remain that you can save the seeds and plant back. I mean, there's sorrel, there's pigeon peas, right? There's maybe beans, some variety of beans, and so on. But there are hardly much crops that we can save seeds and utilize because of this gene, this terminator gene in the crop, in terms of there are some crops that would actually grow and flowers, but it wouldn't bear. They would grow flowers, bear, but very small because of these hybrid crops. So we are basically we have basically lost control over our agriculture production, and we haven't really realized it. And I'm saying this over and over. If we are to end up in a situation where we have no access to outside suppliers, the field corn was something that we could plant, harvest, store. It can stand up to a longer time than the sweet corn because of the high starch content. You can make your flour and so on with it. The sweet corn, the minute you leave it outside for a day or two, it starts shriveling, start losing turgidity and those sort of things. So we have to be careful what we're doing. So even though if we're getting involved in sustainable agriculture, it goes back to choosing the right inputs for the farm, right? Global inequity and so on. So this is just a picture of soil degradation. When I get into soil health, I will show you some videos or one video of soil degradation where I had to work with that soil and basically got it back up and running where it can produce very good crops now. Because of rising temperature of climate change, right, they are making the areas drier, and crops, corn, need a good bit of water at times. And because the area is dry, here we have a field of corn that is basically dry. I'll tell you this, field corn would have stand up to this, but no, we want sweet corn, right? So the major components of sustainable agriculture, right? So the main components of sustainable agriculture and conventional farming are the same. However, you have to focus on how you're going to basically manage them. So we have to think about soil management, fertility, right? Soil and moisture conservation. We have to think about crop management in terms of things like crop rotation and intercropping, right? We have to think about water management in terms of drip irrigation and water harvesting, pest and disease management, IPM and IDM, and waste management in terms of composting and utilizing back the waste into your farm and so on, right? So common sustainable practices are simple things: crop rotation, right? Planting legumes after nitrogen-dependent crops, such as things like corn to replenish nitrogen in the soil. Drip irrigation, right? To basically provide water directly to the root of the plant to prevent any sort of water loss and waste. In your irrigation system, your drip irrigation system, if you're setting it up for yourself, when you are buying the emitters, choose your emitters based on the crop that you're growing. So in this picture over here with the ground cover and irrigation line, that's my backyard, and I actually set up my own irrigation system. So my emitters, them are 1 gallon emitters, right? 1 gallon per hour. So if I come home and I turn on the irrigation system, it's going to drip to each of the pineapple plants. In an hour, each plant will get 1 gallon of water, then I can turn it off. No, I don't have one of those fancy timers. I basically only needed water to my pineapples when they were young like this. I really don't turn on that irrigation system anymore because the pineapples are basically grown and they can withstand things like heat and so on now. So I hardly turn on that irrigation system, right? So I don't have a fancy timer that way I will punch on my phone to turn it on, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on though, right? When we get to soil water. I think that's for next session 2. Right? So other things you need to focus on are things like integrated pest management in terms of using native predators. Like for example, when we had the high effect of mealybug that was affecting us here, native predators were brought in, things like ladybug beetles to assist with that. Normally when I have mealybug, what I normally do is just use some Dishwashing liquid, 1 tablespoon in a gallon of water. The dishwashing liquid tends to dry out the mealybug, they dry up the dye, they move on with their life, right? So I don't go out there and get any fast stack and whatever other chemicals that individual would run to the agriculture input warehouse or green finger to purchase, right? I try to start by using what I have around me. So I would use things like dishwashing liquid, I'll use charcoal, I use neem, glycerida, peppers, baking soda, those sort of things. My students at the college, they do not use any sort of chemicals. Whatever we grow, we try to stay as organic as possible, right? So yes. So planting cover crops to prevent soil erosion and to conserve moisture, not only cover crops, but also ground covers. So now in this picture, you would see I have ground covers, aka agrofabric. I do not like plastic mulch. I personally do not like plastic mulch because one, it's not breathable. If there's no water around and there's rain, if there's no hole for the water to enter, then we're gonna have problems. So I prefer agrofabric. It's breathable, right? So that there's exchange of air, and also if rain comes, water will actually soak through the agrofabric, right? It performs the same barrier as weed to help to keep weeds, suppress weeds, and also conserve soil moisture. So I just do not like I don't like plastic mulch. So you will never see me using plastic mulch in anything that I'm involved in, right? Even if it's given to me free, right? Also, what you would have to do, grow a diverse produce to ensure biodiversity in the food system is not lost, because what you want to do is create, as I said, an ecosystem of different plants. So for example, when I'm planting things like tomato, I'll intercrop with things like basil. The flowers will help to attract insects and those sort of things. Intercrop with things like marigold. It will help to attract beneficial, I should say, insect. And also growing basil with tomato also give the tomato a lovely, nice flavor, right? Small scale agriculture growing on small local farms instead of large farms. When you get to large farms and you think mass production, sometimes you just slip back into doing conventional. So you start small and then you can grow, right? Intercropping livestock with crops, ideal. I mean, most farmers I encounter now, they're focused on crops. They hadn't have any livestock, and sometimes when they have things like a fruit tree, they complain, oh, it's either small, there's dropping of fruits and so on. And then I'll ask them things like, have you given it any sort of nutrients? And they'll be like, no, because they were saying that when they grew up, their parents never really give them nutrients. But it had the animals around that would leave droppings and so on. And oftentimes they would have compost and all those sort of things. Green manure around the tree and it will rot and those sort of things. So that would add back nutrients to the plant. But you're not adding any nutrients to the tree crop and you're expecting magic, right? Self-sustainable farming or peri-urban farming. And when you hear peri-urban farming, you're talking about farming on the outskirts of the city. So a couple of years ago, when I decided to do my little backyard garden, which I do as a hobby, as I do not sell any of my pineapple. It's not a lot, it's just a bit over 300-400 plants, right? So it was a hobby, and also because I'm living in the area that is termed as a new city, I try to get my neighbors to be involved in agriculture production, right? So it was like a monkey see, monkey do situation, and also to encourage, as I said, peri-urban farming. So in this picture here, where you have the plantain and the banana, and I call this my magical plot of banana, because listen to me, these banana never stop bearing. They like literally never stop bearing. So there's no time I can say I am hungry or I have nothing to cook, because I can actually steam banana and use it with fish or whatever meats supply, right? So here I have my plantains and my banana and my field of pineapples, right? So it's the old picture. They're all grown now. I'll maybe later on in the presentation, they're new picture. So self-sufficient farming is producing most or all of your food on your own land or backyard. And when I was growing up, my home was basically self-sufficient, right? Before all those things were removed and a house was built in the backyard in that area. But I had everything that you could think about. I had cocoa, plantain, grindy, guava, tangerine, breadfruit, golden apple, coconut, cherry, plums, not only the red, but we had like 4 trees in the yard, red and yellow plums, orange. If you could think about it, we had it, elderberry and so on, right? Because I grew up in a time where everybody think about having a backyard garden and being self-sufficient. The only thing we needed from the supermarket was things like rice, because we have fruit trees for making juice. We had lime, we had mangoes as well, avocado and so on. But now everybody is focused on lawn, and then they go to the market, see the farmers, and then they order the vendors there, and they complain that they're not paying that for the price, but they're not even aware of how hard farming is. I mean, the group that I'm working now, Michelle is online here, Eco Gardens, they could tell you how hard it is. And I said one time in the group chat, because y'all are not, you know, adhering to some of the things that you're supposed to do, because you're doing it half the way and leaving it. When you go to the market and the farm and the vendor tell you this is the price, pay them for me, please, because they work hard, especially in this heated climate. They work real hard. So please pay them the price. If they say they want $10 for the lettuce, don't even blink. Just get them the $10 and go about your business, because it's hard work out there. And if you don't put in the hard, after you finish putting the hard work, it comes easy, right? So peri-urban agriculture basically give women and other non-heads household a low barrier occupation through which they can support the family. So when you have a backyard garden, if you have excess, you can sell to your neighbor, you can take to work and sell. I remember Auntie Bernie is telling me that her mom made $800 on selling of lettuce and so on. So you have a small area, you can maximize production. And I will talk about that and show you how ways that you can maximize production. Even though there are individuals in here who might be living in a concrete jungle, there are ways that you can grow stuff. You can get a barrel, the same barrel you're getting from overseas with food, you can use it to grow food, right? You can use bamboo, you can use a half a fridge, whatever you have access to, you must be able to utilize it, create a grow box, whatever it is, to basically grow food, right? And when you think about the 4 pillars of food security, as I mentioned before, you're talking availability. So the food must be available, but at times the food could be available and there's no access to it. Because if you have farmers in, let's say, North Leeward, right, have carrots and all that you need, tomato, but you cannot access it, that means we are still at the stage of food insecurity, right? So you must be able to access it, right? You must be able to utilize it. And when we talk about utilizing it, I remember a few years ago, there were drive where they were giving away ackee plants and so on. We're not accustomed to ackee. So I personally not going to eat ackee. I do not care if I have to wait till it's open so it don't be poisonous. The fact that you're telling me I have to wait till it open so it does not kill me, that needs to stay where it is. I'm not having anything to do with ackee. So in terms of utilization, I cannot utilize that. So in order to be food secure, you must have access to your food available. The food must be available. You must be able to utilize it. So let's say, for example, some country decide to dump tons of chickpea or, well, everybody else knows, chana on us. What are we going to do with that? We're not Indian. That's not our sort of culture. So you must be able to utilize it, right? So whatever it is that we're talking, when we're talking food security, if we cannot utilize it, if it's not our culture, then we are still in food insecure. And you must think about stability. So it must be there constantly. So stability is very, very important, right? So this picture is just an example. This is my pine now all grown up, right? So this pictures of ways how you can get involved in growing. My sister Fiona can tell you that there's a part in my backyard that I have about 100 and something tires that is on the concrete area, because I was determined to utilize every part of my yard. I'll be honest about something. I have not fulfilled all that I had planned to do as it relates to my yard, because as time went by, I got caught up in other different projects and I never went back to finishing my project that I started in my yard. But I will eventually finish it because I started it again recently, right? So you can, This was my grandmother flower garden, God rest her soul. I mean, I remove all her flowers because I can't eat that, right? I remove all her flowers, establish beds, and I install pineapples, right? In tiles, I have sweet potato. So this you can see right here in the pictures. I have sweet potato, some parts of in the yard, in tiles, and here I have pineapple. Also in a tub or big tub, big flower pot, I have a small pomegranate tree. Well, it's not small because it's really overladen with pomegranate. And my friends just joke and say it's force-ripe, but it's not force-ripe. It's just that it's in the container and it's kept at a certain size because I'm always pruning it back. So it's overladen with pomegranate. So there's no reason that you cannot have a fruit tree in your yard. I try not to put fruit trees in the ground in my backyard as we had before, the small amount of backyard that I have, because I know the root can damage your foundation, and the house I'm living in is a house I grew up in, and I really don't want something like that occurring. So I'm very careful of where I'm going to install any sort of fruit trees, right? So now you all know about sustainable agriculture. You know about some of the practices that you have to do. You're now going to get involved in actually starting your backyard garden. So 3 things you have to do. You have to plan, set a goal, and then you take action. So planning, meaning you have to plan what crops that you're going to plant and why you're going to plant these crops, what is going to be to supplement your home in terms of reducing your expenditure, or you're going to plant it because of maybe some health problems and you're going to start eating healthier, or you're looking to make a little extra dollar, right, to supplement your income, right? So then you must set your goals. If you have a plot of land that is maybe 5,000 square feet, you're going to say, you're going to search, you're going to research, put your space in, know what you're going to put in, set your goals, knowing what when you want to harvest and those sort of things, so you can actually start setting up a crop production plan. Then you're going to take action. So what you're going to do, you're going to think about a variety, or start writing down. So all these things you list, the variety of crops that you want to plant, whether it's beef master tomatoes, large tomatoes, or heat master tomatoes, or Caribbean. It depends on if you have a market and what is your desired market. So your variety is very important, whether these going to be a quality to meet the market, is going to be a disease tolerant, it's going to be suited to the environment. And I want to stress on suited to the environment for a while, because I'll tell you this. You see, in these barrels that we import, we just import enough seeds, and some of these seeds not suitable to the environment. And oftentimes, you do not do a ragdoll test or viability test, and you plant out a whole area only to realize none in germinate. And then you get depressed and say agriculture hard, or the soil no good. You start pointing fingers and you miss the main part. You did not do a viability test, so you do not know what is the germination percentage. So what you're going to do a viability test, you're going to take 10 seeds, right? Wrap it in a tissue, moist the tissue. Couple days later, you're going to open it for germination, but you're going to keep the tissue moist, right? If in that 10 seeds, 7 germinate, you know you're going to have problems if you're planting out things like corn or okra, whatever the case may be, because you're not going to have a field that is well planted. It's going to have spots in between, right? So I personally don't like to use seeds that are viability percentage of 70 and below. Anything 85 and above, fine. I might have 1 or 2 spots in between. I know that's easy to replenish. But when you see 50% and 40% germination rate, I beg you, please don't put in the garbage, because you're going to be wasting your time over and over. Even if you try to do germination in a tray, the tray is going to be scanty and it's going to feel like you're frustrating yourself. So do a viability test, right? So the first thing you're going to think about, as I said, variety. Second one, land preparation. How you're going to do your land preparation, whether you're going to plow, whether you're going to do beds and with drain, whether you're going to do a ridge and forest system to create banks, or you're going to actually do no-till farming based on maybe there's an issue, it's a sloping area and you don't want to disturb it, so you're going to do no-till farming. So you're just going to dig the hole where you're going to plant the crop, right? Then what you want to do, we do have a soil lab, but we don't have people who goes around very regular and do soil tests. So what you're going to do is buy a simple, oh my Lord, I don't have them here, I took them down to the college, right? Soil test strips, where you can basically take some sample, dip the pH strips into the sample, and you will know about your pH, right? But I can tell you the pH here is neutral. Our last soil reading that was done by Dr. Eudoxy, he was saying that the soil is good because of the effect of the volcano eruption. We have a good pH. You don't need to add any lime that you're getting free from the ministry. That none of that is needed. Put that in a corner somewhere. Use that lime when you're going to do that limestone when you're going to do your composting, so you could speed up the effect of compost, right? Then you're going to see if you're going to add organic matter, all these go into land preparation. Next, you're going to think about what fertilizer you need. So if you're putting in manure or you're buying organic fertilizer, when we talk organic fertilizer, there are organic fertilizer that are for sale. Cobanon usually carry. Also, there are things like blood meal, bone meal, feather meal, and those things. You can buy compost. I do use sargassum seaweed once I have access to it, and we can talk about the argument that sargassum seaweed has heavy metals, this, that. Most of the chemicals that we are in, organic chemicals that we are importing, so we are talking agassiz, cytokine, bio 20, well, bio 20 not organic, but bio 20 also having sargassum, bountiful harvest, all these organic fertilizer are made from sargassum, right? Sargassum seaweeds. And in St. Lucia, there's algal organics that have been making millions from using the seaweed. So when we see arguments like, oh, heavy metals, whatever, unless it's a peer-reviewed article, I really pay no mind to it, because I remember as a child, I say coconut oil ain't good and avocado ain't good. But no, avocado coming back to us in hair, face thing. Listen, do your research before you start to jump on the bandwagon that things are not good. In your planning stage now, you're going to say whether you need irrigation based on your area, if it's dry, if it's soil type and those sort of things. If you need irrigation and what type of irrigation system, the source of which you're getting the water from, whether you're going to do water harvesting or using water from the main, right? Then you're going to think of your pest and disease management, right? Whether you're going to import some sticky traps or you're going to create your own. Then you're going to think about cultural practices that you have to do post-harvest in the event. Make yourself knowledgeable on post-harvest, because that is very important in terms of food security, right? Oftentimes I would say to individuals that I know, do not pluck your plant from your fruit from the plant. You are damaging not only the fruit that you're harvesting, but you're damaging the tree itself and after the plant itself. And after a while, they're gonna say, oh, this pest take over this plant, this tree, this tomato, this happened to this tomato. But you're the one who damaged it, because when you pull it, obviously it's going to break. It's not going to heal properly. It's going to be a source for microorganisms to enter. Then you're going to have spread of disease. Now with the fruit that you harvest, the stem is going to come out. That area is going to be a host for microorganisms, also source for water due to respiration rate, right? And then you're going to have the top of your either your avocado or the top of your tomato start spoiling and what's it, and then you say, oh, they give me old thing, this, the cell, the variety and good, this, but you are the one who damage it, right? And then you have to think about value added in terms of where you might have extra amount of things like breadfruit. If you have breadfruit, you can turn it into breadfruit flour, you can turn it into breadfruit taco, you can turn it into many breadfruit porridge and so on. I mean, breadfruit might be underutilized, but it's very versatile. Same with dasheen. You can use dasheen to do so many things, but you just have to do your research and find ways and means of where you can do this from home. For example, during my studies right now, I did from home, I did seaweed amcha powder mix, right? So it's seaweed, sea moss, Lord, sea moss. So basically, I got the fresh sea moss from my row. I wash it and I sun dry it, and well, not sun dry. Basically, put it out to dry in a cool area. Sun did not penetrate it fully, but it had access to air, free movement of air and heat as well, right? And I dried it, and then I basically grounded it into powder, and then I got green mango, peel them, dry them, ground them into powder as well. And then I did my mixture by adding things like cardamom, clove, nutmeg, ginger, orange peel, and all these were grounded into powder. And I made a mix. So you have to do your research and know what is it that you have the ability to do from the comfort of your kitchen. And in the last session, agro-processing, we will talk a little bit about that, all right? Now you already did your planning. You set your goals, you're about to take action. So you're going to buy seedlings, right? You're going to buy seedlings or seeds for planting. So selection of seeds for sowing. The seeds must be suitable to the local environmental condition. And I can't stop stressing on that, because all those who like to import seeds and complain that the seeds didn't germinate, something wrong with this, the soil ain't good, ants eat it. Make sure that the seed that you buy is suitable to the local environmental condition. It must have uniform size. If you have a packet of seeds and they do not have a good bit of at least 75% uniform size, we have a problem, right? You must have a good germination rate of above 85%. It should be treated against pests and be selected from high yielding varieties, right? Selecting seedlings. And individuals who sell seedlings normally, yes, do have a problem with me. And I can tell you this up front, I can be a little miserable at times, because you see, when you have your seedlings that is in this tray going through hard time and you don't start to produce flowers, you trying to sell that to me, you're heading good. So your seedling must have a proper shoot to root ratio. So it must be spindly, right? Two things can cause it to be spindly and long and elongated, right? And when that happens, that's elongation of the cell wall. And when the cell wall elongate more than it's supposed to be, when you plant that seedling out into the field, a little wind blow, a little rain come, it topple over, it break, seedling gone. So your whole, all the money you spent on seedling was a total waste. So this occur by two things. One, excessive amount of nitrogen. Two, they set the seeds, they didn't take off the cover if they're covering it, or it's in a dark place and the seedling is trying to head towards sunlight. So it get long and spindly, and I do not want that. That is a weak seedling, waste of my money. Please keep that. You can plant it in your garden at home. So sometimes they think that I'm a little bit rude, but no, I don't want that. This is my investment. And if you're selling me seedling like that, I don't want it, right? It must have a uniform appearance. It must be free from pest and disease. Yes, I normally go and pull it out the seedling tray and look at the roots. I'm sorry, if I'm buying, I need to make sure it's healthy, right? So I look at the roots, ensure that it has nothing looking brown. The roots are nice and white and pretty and growing, right? So it must be free from certain pest and disease. And within a late, I know of someone I normally purchase seeds from. She tell me, you've been purchasing seedlings from me for years, and you didn't have to do me that, you didn't have to do me that. But no, we have the African giant snail. So I ask you, where she seedlings them located? I come in to inspect a place. Where she getting she soil from? She tell me she gets she soil from up in the mountain. She buying premix and what's that. But I have to ensure that you're not selling, because she's located in the area that they say that the giant African snail, or close to that area, is located. And I know people can mash that some way, take it there, take the seed, the eggs from one location to the other. So I had to ask my question, and I know she felt a little bit uncomfortable and what's not, but I can only be me because I am spending my money. So I have to ensure that my seedling that I purchase is going to be free from pests and diseases, right? Has healthy white roots. It has no balling of the roots, because when you have balling of the roots, it's root bounded too old. So those who are in the tray, seedling tray, longer than the time, and they have a ball, and they're saying, look, we are healthy roots, madam, keep that please, because that's going to take a long time when I plant it out in the field to start realizing it's a different environment, and it's going to have to start growing, because it's already in a mode of survival. It's going to start producing flowers and eventually seeds, because it have to think about survival mode. So when you go to the market and other places to buy seedlings and they have the little flowers, I beg you, please leave them where they, because they're struggling, and when they plant out in the field, they ain't going to give you the yield that you're supposed to get. You're going to spend more time trying to get them to grow rather than they're supposed to be very vigorously growing. So take note of those things. So Your seedling must have 4 to 6 healthy leaf, green leaf, not yellow leaf, not purple leaf, none of them leaf, because when you see they have purple leaf, they can be deficient in things like boron. Yellow leaf, they can be deficient in things like nitrogen. So you must have healthy leaves, right? It must be absent from premature flowers and fruits, as stress seedlings will not produce to its full genetic potential. It must have no sign of deficiency such as yellow, brown, or purple discoloration. As I said, you must look at the roots, ensure that they have proper growth. They mustn't have any mushy stems, no wilting, no distorted leaf. If the roots are brown and soft instead of white and has a funny smell, just tell them, oh, somebody call me, I have to go now. I can't take the plants with me anymore, right? So leave them with leave those plants. You may like to support them, but leave them with this. And then individual now who sow seeds. And I normally have a major problem with individual who I purchase seedlings from. They can't tell me which day they were sown. They cannot tell me the variety. None of these things. So if you're going to be involved in seedling production, please label your seedling. So you're going to put the date it was sown, the variety, and so on, right? Those things are very, very important, especially when you're selling to individual. The first thing I ask is what variety of seedlings that you have, what variety of tomato seedling, what variety of pepper seedlings that you have, right? How old are they, right? So self-sustainable agriculture. Do you want to grow your own food, but you're limited? Basically, you have no soil, you live in a concrete jungle, your yard space is too small, or you have a problem with land tenure. There are some things that you can do. So in the first picture, you have a grow box. Simple. If you're on a concrete area, just get some blocks, or if you have access to things like coconut body, you just get them, line the area, right? Line an area and fill inside with soil, right? And you can plant. If you have access to old PVC, you can create a PVC garden, right? Also, here's in my backyard as well. If you have access to tires, and tires are always about the place, just visit the tire shop and you can use these for planting, right? Also, in this other picture right here, I did this a couple of years ago. This is pak choy growing in a pallet, right? So basically at the bottom, I just basically put cut a flour sack, punch holes in it, line the bottom, fill it with soil, and then I plant my pak choy. This, the same bag that you get your rice, if you buy the 25-pound rice, or your flour, you can fill it with soil, stitch back the top, lay it down, cut holes, and plant your pak choy, your lettuce, your cabbage, those sort of things. All these water bottles that we have, instead of we dump them in the river, which is causing water pollution, we can basically use them as planters, right? In the other picture here, this is a strawberry planter. As I said, the same barrel that you're using, that you're getting your goodies from the United States and Canada and so on you can basically use it and create a strawberry plant. I think it's in the next picture or another slide. I will actually show you how it's done. Here you can also import grow bags. This is the walkway to my gate, well, to my porch. So these are, well, I don't have these anymore because every time somebody come, they ask if I could get one, so I keep giving away until I'll just disappear. So you can put, these are 5-pound grow bags, no, 5-pound grow bags. You fill it with soil and you can plant your pineapples in it, right? Then here at the college, we have some tires with sweet potatoes and our little herb plot with utilizing the tires. You can use bamboo. I mean, now it's let's call it glide fox, bamboo time. When they finish blowing out the bamboo and what's not, please don't dump it in the river. Just take it, cut it out, and use it to plant your food for your home, right? You have recycled guttering. You can use it to plant things like lettuce, cabbage, pak choy, chive, kale, celery, parsley, those shallow root crops, right? So this is my strawberry planter in progress. I have 2 at the college, but this is mine at home. So yes, I'm stuck. So basically what I did, you get a grinder and you cut across, right? So you put you do a spacing. I think my spacing is about 12 inches, 12, about that. right? So I cut across, then I use a heat gun. Inside the barrel, you'll see a piece of wood. So basically I push it in, heat it, and then pull it back out to form the pockets, right? After that, you're supposed to get, a piece of PVC pipe, right? Punch some hole, cap the bottom. So at the bottom of this barrel now, you're going to cut a hole so that the PVC pipe can go right through and go right to the bottom. So when you're setting up this bin, this planter, you're going to elevate it on a blocks, right? So you put it on blocks on both ends so that the center where the PVC pipe is can go right through, but at the bottom is capped. In the middle of that PVC pipe, you're going to fill it with rabaca or pebbles or stone, right? In that area, that is where you're going to add your water, so the water will go to the roots of the plant. And in this area, you plant whatever you want, whether it's tomato, lettuce, chive, peppers, whatever it is, you plant them in this area. You won't put peppers, yes, you can put peppers and tomato on the first row down here so that it can be upright. So you know, with the tomato, you'll have to basically stake it, trellis it, and so on. But you can plant everything around. And then to the top up here, you can put in ginger, you can put in carrots, sweet potato, root crops that would penetrate down into that soil, right? So as I said, the same barrel that you get your food in, you can grow food in. Right? These pictures are just some examples.
Sorry, Ms. May I ask one question, please? With regards to the PVC pipe down inside of that drum, is it upright, standing upright, or it's going across horizontally?
Oh, no, it's standing upright. That's why I was pointing like this.
Upright.
It stands upright, and fill it with stones.
The rubber cup.
When you're watering, you know, you can't just water to the top. You just can't. Sorry, I was trying to get a point. You just can't water to the top here and expect the water would go down to the roots. So what you'll do, you'll pour the water in the middle of this, and it will go to the end of these roots, so you can provide water to the plants.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And when we take the break, it's when I normally stop for questions, because my sessions could be a little bit long and we start a bit late tonight. So I think I'll have a break coming up soon. Right, so this is an A-frame hydroponic system, and this is an A-frame planter, right? So this one is grown in water and this is grown in soil, right? A-frame because it takes less space and produce more. So you're thinking about maximum production in a small space, right? So these are, oh my God, why does this keep going back? All right, sorry. So these are some additional way. If you're gonna plant root crops like sweet potato, dasheen, edos, you can still do it if you are living on a concrete jungle. Now you're going to basically use 2 rough blocks, fill it with your soil, right? So you can do that. So here you have it in that picture, and in the bottom picture, here what's basically filled with soil, and we plant sweet potato. Same thing here, right here, just another example of a grow box. So I normally have a small activity area where I ask some questions, but I normally just ask the question and go, but I answer the question on the next slide. So what are 3 benefits of sustainable agriculture? We have it contribute to environmental conservation. It reduces energy consumption, public health, safety and awareness. It minimizes or prevent pollution, reduces air pollution, prevents soil erosion and reduction in cost of production, and it also increases biodiversity, right? So we are going to get into some strategies of sustainable agriculture. So the first thing we're going to talk about is IPM and IDM. And IPM basically stands for Integrated Pest Management, and IDM stand for Integrated Disease Management, right? So these are basically broad approaches that integrate sustainable agriculture practices for economic control of pests and disease. So when we hear integrated pest management, right, we don't omit chemicals, right? But chemicals should be our last resort. It shouldn't be our first approach. So if you know you have some sort of pest, going to use something like diazinon and Fastac shouldn't be your first approach, and malathion. These should not be your first approach. You should try to see what you can do to reduce the pest load without adding pesticide, right? So this requires careful consideration of available pest and disease control techniques and integrating appropriate measure that would discourage the development of pest population and keep pesticide levels to a reduction or minimize, right? So you don't create a risk to health, human health and environment, right? So benefit of IPM approach, you have easy to implement, a healthier ecosystem because you're not going to be using all these chemical, killing off the bees, killing off the butterflies and so on, right? You have increase in beneficial insect and a decrease in pesticide resistant. Because when we talk about pesticide resistant, because with some, I don't even want to get into what some farmers is doing here, because I remember when I was a final year student at UWI, I had to do a final year project. So it involves me interviewing 100 farmers between St. Vincent, well, across St. Vincent and Grenadines. I remember one day I was in the area of Montreal and heading up that side, I passed a farmer and he was there spraying his crops. So he couldn't leave to engage in my survey. So I left and I went further up, promising to pass it him the next day. So I from the smell, I know he was spraying diazonon, and I asked him just to be sure. The next day, I'm back in the area and he's harvesting. So I said, but no, there's a re-entry period into the field before you can harvest. And he said to me, my wife just gave baby, I need money. I need money to basically deal with buying Pampers and whatever else that he needed to buy. So here he harvests these things and they are going to be ingested in our system. In terms of pesticide resistance, let me tell you what some farmers do. The instructions say 5 ml per gallon of water. These farmers think if you add 20 ml, it's ideal because it will get rid of the pest faster. That is their mentality. And after you keep using and abusing this sort of pesticide on this crop, it eventually end up becoming pesticide resistant, right? So no matter how much you use this pesticide on that crop, it no longer works, right? Because of the amount that you have been using. So the pest eventually, nothing happens, right? And things like that, when you're using pesticides and other chemical and what's not, you realize over a period of time, when we ingest this food, we also become antibiotic resistant because they say to give the animal 5 ml or 2 ml or whatever the case may be, and you're giving them 20 ml, 30 ml, and so on. And then sometimes you doesn't leave the medication to run the course of time, and then it's slaughtered and we ingest it and so on. And eventually we get a cold, we go to the doctor, or we get some sort of thing, cut damage, and you have to use antibiotic, and you realize the antibiotic working because you have become antibiotic resistant. Same with the animal are becoming antibiotic resistant because farmers are abusing the chemical. They say 5 ml, use 5 ml. In their mind, if they use 20 and 30, it will get better faster, right? So these are the things that we are facing, encountering, and hence the reason we have pesticide resistance and so on, right? So there's, in benefit of IPM, there's public benefit, right? There's cost effective and good public image, right? So in integrated pest management, it combines the use of biological, cultural, and chemical practices to control insect pests in agriculture production. IPM should not be confused with just organic practices, right? It does not discourage the use of spraying chemical, but it promotes spraying with selective chemical when the crops really need it. So if you're going to spray chemical, you're going to focus on chemicals that are in the green area in terms of moderately hazard or not hazard, or those sort of things. So what you would use are things like neem and pesticides made from neem and so on. But before you even get into using pesticide, biosecurity measures are very, very important, and these things must be put in place. Things like a footbath to prevent people visiting other farm entering your farm, and they're bringing pest and disease onto your farm. Also limit the amount of traffic that is coming onto your farm. People love, when they see crop growing, they just get curious, and everybody wants to flock around to see, and they want to touch, and they want to do this, and no, please, I don't know where you've been. Stay outside of my farm. Simple, right? Then they come, they're eating whatever they're eating, and in their mind, they're telling you, oh, it's a fruit, it go rot. But who knows if this fruit have fruit fly, what disease it have, and then there it's on your land. Your crop is going to be exposed to these sort of things. And another thing that I have a problem with, you see these guys who like to harvest the crop last minute, and they go down the road and they meet the boys them on the block, and they pick the boys them up off the block, and they say, let we go harvest some tomato, or let we go harvest some kind of crop in the solanaceous family. And then after a while, you see your crops them start dying back. These boys were on the block, they're smoking. We're talking things like tobacco mosaic virus. They come onto your farm. Not only that, they do not have protective where they have no idea how to go about harvesting your crop. And then, you tend to utilize these people to not and spend the correct amount of money to hire someone who is knowledgeable in these things, and you end up causing more problems to yourself than a benefit, right? So these are some things that you must take into consideration. Crop rotation, very important, right? For example, if in an area you're planting solanaceous crop, and when we're talking solanaceous crop, we're talking tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, these are solanaceous crop. And if your tomato is affected by a disease, please do not put in eggplant or sweet peppers, right? They're from the same family. More than likely, what is affecting that crop will affect that. So you have to rotate it and put a crop from maybe the cucurbit family. So you're talking butternut squash, watermelon, pumpkin, what else? Cucumbers, right? Those sort of things. So crop rotation will help to reduce the disease or pesticide load that would actually affect one species or variety of crops, and it would not affect the other. So crop rotation is very important, right? Rather than you have to keep spraying with pesticides and so on, to reduce that, just rotate the crop, right? So here you have the 5 minutes break, where you have 5 minutes that you can ask me any questions you want. Latoya, could you put on the timer for 5 minutes, please? So
Will do.
here you can take a water break, use the bathroom. I know we
But it's almost 8 o'clock.
Right, I know we are almost close to 8 o'clock, so I will just go a little bit over 8, like 8:10, and I'll leave the rest presentation for next class. All right. So let me see if there's any question in the chat. Nobody coming in my garden. Who wants to give me a barrel? I just want equipment. When you give Ranita, I'm not giving away any equipment. Yes, Granny Flower's gone. Hello, Aki.
I have a question. Okay. Well, comment and question. I also do not believe in using harsh chemicals, mainly because I'm very health conscious and I'm allergic to most chemicals. So I try to go the organic way. How often do you use your natural natural remedies to spray your crops to prevent them from catching pests and diseases?
Well, to be honest, the first thing aphids. Let's take, for example, aphids. Normally, I don't spray before, right? So unless I see something is affecting, I would not spray with anything such as squeezy, neem, or whatever. My first approach is intercropping. And with intercropping, you will help to deter some of these pests from certain crops. So you intercrop, if you have tomatoes, you intercrop with things like basil and marigold. If you have other crops, you could intercrop with things like chive and garlic and so on. So these things can help to deter pests. And some of the other herbs them that we have around, we can intercrop with them so that they can deter pests. So that's my first thing that I do, intercropping. Then I would start scouting for pests. And the first pest I look for is aphids, because aphids always, listen, aphids is the first thing to come. So what I do, I spray. If I spray this week for aphids, I'll spray the other week. And after that, I really don't have a problem with aphids in things like lettuce and tomatoes after that. Now I'll have to look out for other diseases in tomatoes, such as the mites and what's not. But I'll tell you this, in the last few years I've been planting tomato, I have not been affected with mites, so I am basically good. So with the aphids, you would be able to monitor. Week 1, if you have a high incident, you spray. By the second week, when I'm saying spray, what I normally use is dishwashing liquid. So, right, 1 tablespoon to 1 gallon of water. And you try not to use those dishwashing liquid that have things like oxy and those sort of things, because they're harsh. So I kind of like, I don't want to say addicted to Dawn, but Dawn is my thing. So the Dawn with the little yellow duck, that is what I basically use in terms of dishwashing liquid. All right.
Hi, good night.
Hello.
I'm having a problem in my home garden with crickets. They're eating down everything. What can I use? Because I'm into organic.
All right. So with crickets, I normally use things like neem. So when I say neem, there's a lot of organic or biopesticides on the market now. So there's Neem X at, what am I name? Nash in Leyu. Kobano also have one. It has a different name. So it's no longer just neem oil alone. They're making other chemical biopesticides from them. So the neem works for me, right? But before neem, I used to use Sevens, and the one that has all those insects on the outside in the yellow, the red container at Ace, that is what I used to deal with my mold cricket.
That don't work for me at
It
all.
don't work for you?
I tried that. I use pepper. I use everything I could think about organic.
So we'll
and
try
what
the
I know
neem.
about.
Try
I
the
would
neem.
definitely, yeah, I would definitely.
Right, and also what you can do is put some neem to dry, crush them and till them into the soil, or use them as mulch.
Okay, thank you.
Someone raise their hand.
Good night. Because we're wondering what can be used to get rid of slugs.
Get rid of what? Slugs? All right, so you kind of jump ahead of the presentation. So with slugs, right? I don't really encourage the use of salt, because sometimes individuals tend to use too much salt over a period of time. I don't know how high incident of slugs that you have, but copper wire works for me. Right? I know there are individuals who use slug baits. I've never used a slug bait. I may have bought a container one time and I have no idea where what I did with it if I dump it out, but I do not use the slug baits. What I normally use is copper wire. So in an old fan, what you can do is strip it out, and those copper wire, you throw them in the field, right? Or around your plants and so on, especially in the area that you think has a high amount of slugs, you rest them there. What the copper wire do when they pass over them, it kind of shocks them, electrocute them in a sort of way, so they basically either die or move to a different location. But copper wire has worked for me. I have not seen any slug around in a long period of time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, it's Sharon Allen. I have a question. I have a backyard garden, and then I have some sweet potatoes, some peanuts, yam, and different stuff planted in my backyard, green bananas. But in the sweet potatoes, you have a lot of biting ants, and it's really hectic in the garden.
Sorry, excuse me, that's the 5 minutes.
All right, okay. All right, so with the biting ants, right? Because it's outside, what you would use indoor would not work, especially now, because if rain comes, it wouldn't work. But for ants, what I normally use is some molasses with some yeast. So I put the molasses in a pot, add the yeast, heat it, and then I create a cake. What that do is upset their digestive system and they eventually die. That works for me if I have ants around in an area where sheltered. I mean, it's not raining now, so you can try that. But once they consume that, they die, right? Otherwise from that, I will go back to the same thing like sevens or which I really don't promote the use of 7, but if you have a serious issue, then yes. But otherwise from that, the neem will help with that, right? The neem
Okay, thank you.
really work magic. All right, so I'll take the rest questions in a while. Let me just wrap up for a bit so that we can have a shorter session next time, because this means I'm in this 5 minutes approach me that I'm in the middle of my current presentation. I think I have about 60 slides. Yeah, so crop rotation is basically the cornerstone of pest control in the tropics. When a single crop is planted repeatedly on the same soil, insect and disease attack this crop and allow the pest level to build up and become unmanageable, right? So what you basically do is crop rotation, right? So you also not only do crop rotation to reduce pesticides or disease, but also you do crop rotation to add back nutrients to the soil. So you can go from a heavy feeder to a heavy feeder to a heavy giver. So after you finish harvesting corn, what would be ideal to put in is things like pigeon peas or beans or peanuts or those other things. Because of nitrogen fixing bacteria, they would add back nutrients to the soil, right? So crop rotation not only prevent pesticide buildup, but also help to add back nutrients to the soil. And this is just an example of what you would do. So we have nitrogen fixing plants, which is legumes, things like string beans, pigeon peas. We have crops that are nitrogen using crops. So you're talking about cabbage, those leafy crops, so cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, pak choy, parsley, chive, and so on. Then you have fruits that are potassium using crops. So you have to know when you put in these fruits, if you will have to add some potassium to the soil. And there are things that you can use like your chalk ashes and so on, because that would add potassium to the soil, right? So pumpkin, cucumber, squash, those things are potassium using crops. And then you have phosphorus using crops, because these are what you needed. Phosphorus is not needed for root crops. So you have your dashi, your edo, your sweet potato, and so on, and the list goes on. This is a guide to tell you how you can plant when you are planting, right? Let me just see what I'll stop at cultural practice and we'll wrap up for the night. All right, so cover crops. Most cover crops have all or some of the following benefits, right? Beneficial effects. So cover crops are basically what you plant, and it prevents either the soil from being eroded. It helps to conserve moistures and so on, right? So cover crops would be things like sweet potato, peanuts, beans. Depends on how close you plant your cabbage. All these could be termed as cover crops, right? So cover crop prevents soil erosion. It improves soil structure. It adds organic matter to and nutrients to the soil. It suppresses weed. It conserves soil moisture. It increases farm biodiversity, and obviously it's going to provide food for you. So this is an example of cover crop. This is banana production, and on the floor they have peanuts. This also helps to suppress weed while it adds back nutrients to the crop for the growing banana and so on. And when these are harvested, you can the peanuts is harvested, you can leave them in the field to basically become green manure and add back nutrients to the soil, right? So when you set up your crop, you must think early monitoring. You're monitoring for things like diseases and pests. So you'll be vigilant for disease such as root rot. So when you look at root rot, you could see at the base of the plant is just bending over. You could move your hand and you could see maybe that area is rotting, because it could be something like waterlog or so on, right? Root rot, color rot. You have wilt, leaf spot, stem blight, fruit rot. You must be able to monitor. Monitoring is very important. You look for things like aphids, whitefly, mealybug, and so on. And you can see, because sometimes the leaf start curling, and when you turn the bottom and look at the leaf, you can see whether it's aphids or mealybug or whatever the case may be, right? You could monitor for leaf miners, aphids, and so on. Now, when you have these diseases, what you can basically do is set up some cultural control. And when we talk about cultural control, we talk about non-chemical practices that will reduce these pest establishment and reproduction, right? So pests love bright colors. So what you can do, I'm not sure if anywhere here sells sticky traps, because I've checked many times and I've not gotten access to it, right? But before that, the first thing that is important before we start thinking about sticky trap, field hygiene is important. You see them people who love to sit down in your field and eat the hard dry cake and then take the plastic bag and push it in a corner. Keep them people out your field, because that's why you have ants there. You're not supposed to also eat in your field. When you eat in your field, you're going to drop crumbs, ants is going to come, right? So field hygiene is very important. I just tell my students in plain talk, the only thing you can bring in this field to consume is water. No juice. I don't care how careful you are. You always drip. You always have some sort of accident. So in your field, you might be in a field walking and you always have some kind of dry bread in your pocket to eat. Cut that nonsense out, because you're the same person who's bringing all these ants and so on in the field. So no eating at all in your field. And if you have a bowl of food to eat, go as far away as possible and eat your food, please, or eat before you leave home. Don't take any food into the field, because you're the one who's starting the whole pest breakout in your field, because you're going to have ants. When you see ants, aphids come, and every other thing follow after. Field sanitation, field hygiene is very important. You see, the same way you keep your house. Well, some people. Anyway, moving on. Right? So field hygiene is important. Next thing, you go to sticky traps. Sticky traps, very, very important. So as I say, they love bright yellow. So what you're going to do if you don't have access to sticky traps, you can make your own. So you could have a yellow cup and you're basically going to put some vegetable oil or some Vaseline on it, and you put them in the field. Or you see those Arm & Hammer laundry detergent, cut them up, oil them, Vaseline them, put them above, hang them so that the whitefly and so on and aphids and other things can be attracted to them. So pests like bright colors. So by the end of the week, it's laden with pests, and then you just wash it, put it back again. So these are what you call cultural control sticky traps. Some pests also like blue ones, so you can mix in the field with yellow and blue sticky traps, right? So some barrier methods we have sticky trap, we have copper strips, and the copper strips is normally used for, I'm going to wrap up now, used for slugs. You have your pheromone traps, you have your companion planting, and your proper planting density is very important. You know, so some people greedy and like to planting extra close and not realizing planting that extra close can actually cause more harm than good. So you end up having fungus, and then when you harvest the tomato, or you harvest it, you have things like anthracnose, and you're wondering, oh, I didn't have a good variety and this and that. Yes, you had a good variety, but you're greedy, so you pack everything close together, and now there's no movement of airspace, because one, you're too lazy to prune them, you didn't prune them, any of these things, and then you end up having fungus, right? So you have to, as we go back to before, plan, set your goal, and then take action. So do things properly. So even though if you're going to be doing sustainable agriculture, you have to do it properly. Field sanitation, field hygiene, very, very important. Don't eat, don't drink juice, nothing in your field, right? And later on, though, when we come to post-harvest, we will talk about that same sanitation, field hygiene day, where individual who work whole day in that same clothes want to pack my lettuce, nonsense, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? So this is an example of how to create your sticky traps. You could use sturdy plastic, right? You cut them out and then you oil them with things like petroleum jelly, cooking oil, and you hang them about 20 to 25, one every 20 to 25 square feet for effective control. You could use stake, put them in the close to the bed, or you could hang them. Replace the traps every week, meaning you take them out, you wash them, you put them back, dry them, and you wash them, dry them, put them back, right? And the last one I'm gonna cover under cultural practice is the copper wire. The copper wire is used to repel slugs and snails, right? The copper wire carry a charge and interfere with the slug slime, and they don't like it, so they try to avoid going around that area. Secondly, when you have things like mango trees, your plum, whatever trees that you have, and birds love to come and damage your fruit, all those old CDs that you have in the house, sit down there and you refuse to part with them because the little boyfriend give you them and what's not, and you don't have a CD player, just take it, hang a piece of twine on it, hang it up in the tree. The reflection will drive these birds away, and it will save your plant, your fruits, right? In the field where you have things like corn and you have pigeon peas, once you put a plastic bag there, once that flap in the wind, those birds will hear it and they will actually scare the birds off. So these are just some cultural practice where what you can practice, right? And I'll stop there tonight. Next class, we'll talk about biological control until we come to the end of that session. All right.